The true measure of any society can be found in how it treats its most vulnerable members. Good afternoon. My name is Mustafa Tameez, and I'm really reminded of those words today because of our two guests, Tena and Tama, the co-presidents of Houston PetSet. Because when you talk to them, you realize that we as a society have taken these animals, we've taken away their skills, and they no longer can live in the wild. They are our companions. So we are responsible for them as pet owners, but we're also responsible for them as a society. So with that, I want to start our conversation with both Tena and Tama, the co-presidents of Houston PetSet. So Tena, tell us a little bit about Houston PetSet before we get started in our conversation.
Hi, Mustafa. Thank you. Houston PetSet started out as a nonprofit that was raising funds for other animal nonprofits. And we recognized about 7 or 8 years ago that with all the resources going into this, that we weren't getting ahead of the problem, we were actually falling behind. And so we started looking at ways to solve this. And with that work, we've started collecting data. We're looking at our community partners, working with shelters in Houston, and we found that there is a solution to animal overpopulation in Houston, and that's what we've been working on for the last few years.
Tena, but talk to us about how does COVID-19 affect animal welfare in the greater Houston area?
Well, it's affected animal welfare in a couple of ways, unfortunately. With the shelters having to reduce their shelter staff, intake is down significantly. ACOs are not able to be on the streets to pick up animals, which leaves a large population on the streets. We know that Houston's animal homelessness problem isn't necessarily always at the shelter, but it's the number of animals that are left in the neighborhoods, and this has added significantly to that problem. It's unfortunate because it is also puppy and kitty season, and with the number of animals out there giving birth to puppies, we're seeing a huge uptick in the requests for help for puppies and mamas and animals on the streets. Additionally, we know that this has affected people economically. With the number of people filing for unemployment, without jobs, their ability to care for their animals is greatly affected, and as much as we've tried to help with services on that, we know that this is going to impact the number of people wanting to relinquish their animals, unfortunately. Living situations will change with eviction notices. There aren't a lot of options for people. Where do you take your animal if you need to give it up? People just don't have options. So it's created a real kind of perfect storm for making what was a crisis even worse in this time.
Do you feel that animals are being left behind during COVID-19?
Oh, definitely. With the lack of shelter intake being reduced significantly, the animals on the streets are staying on the streets. So where we used to have the city and the county picking up these animals and running them through the shelter system and then going into rescue groups and going to transport and adoption, those animals are now stuck on the streets. And they will be there until we have city, county, private sector, and nonprofit sector step in. The private sector and nonprofit sector are still working on this, but with a lot of shutdowns in government and city entities, we see this number on the streets growing and the animals being stuck there. Also, we know people who want to surrender their animals won't be able to because there's no place to bring the animals.
So how did you and the Houston Pest Theft shift the way you operate during COVID-19? I can imagine that there's been a big challenge in how do you deal with it?
Oh, definitely, yes. We are not huge in operations, but our operations definitely shifted from transport because what other states are doing right now impacts what Houston PetSet is doing when we're transporting these animals. We've had to look at regulations and the number of rescue groups in other states shutting down. What are they doing? Are they able to get fosters who still want to take these animals in? And a lot of places have shut down, so we've had to look to other resources to bring these animals to, and we changed a lot of our transport to go from the Midwest into the Northeast, where we saw an increase in an uptick in foster care. We also have to look at the spay-neuter unit that we have, the mobile unit we have out in underserved communities. We were able to keep that going. Luckily, we're blessed to be able to keep that going, but for 2 weeks we had to shut down. And in that time, we got a lot of requests for not only spay-neuter services, but for emergency services. People who are feeling the impact of this economic pandemic no longer have the ability to pay for vet services. So they're asking us, can you help? And we realized there's such a need for it that we took our mobile unit and we're spending 2 to 3 days a week now offering free services for these underserved communities, so these animals can stay in the home, so these animals aren't suffering, so these animals who have been hit by cars or who are sick don't just get euthanized or dumped or suffer. We can now care for these animals by offering these emergency vet services. And then we look at fundraising also, which is the backbone for our organization, because we fund 70 plus other animal nonprofits. We've had to shift how we fundraise, and our annual fundraiser, we will not be able to have this in the fall. So what does that look like, and how do we continue to raise funds so we can support these other 70 plus animal nonprofits doing the critical work on the front lines?
You know, I've been seeing reports about shelters clearing out, and I wasn't really sure how to interpret that. Is that good or is that bad? Can you talk a little bit about that?
You know, it's always a good thing when people are rescuing or fostering and the shelters are clearing out, but it's not a true measure of what's happening with animal welfare in a community by any stretch. The animals that make their way to homes and to foster homes are the lucky ones, but when the shelters in Houston are empty, they should fill up again immediately because of the number of strays that are on our streets and in our neighborhoods. We should never have an empty shelter in Houston because we have literally hundreds of thousands of strays roaming our streets that need to be rescued, that want to be rescued, and we have the capacity to do it in our shelter system. We just need to make sure that they're getting to the shelters for that staging period. That way they're able to be vetted, they're able to be prepared for either foster, for adoption, or for transport.
The two of you talk to a lot of rescue partners across the county. And so you're in touch with people and you have a sense, you have the pulse of this. What are you hearing from a lot of your partners when it comes to rescues?
There is a definite increase in need on the streets. I think 55% of our rescue partners said that they're seeing more animals than ever on the streets, and that is a need. So if they're seeing more animals and donations are down, we've got this problem that we're facing when we come out of this, if we come out of this. So this number of animals on the streets, not only are the animals increasing, but they are reproducing then when they're out there also. And they're also more at risk. The longer they're there, the more at risk they are for injury, disease. A lot of the animals are, they get hit by cars. They're used for nefarious activities such as dog fighting. It's easier to get these animals. So when they do finally get into a rescue group or a shelter or a nonprofit, they're even more in need of health services. They need vet care. They need to be rehabilitated in a lot of ways. So this situation, this crisis is on top of another crisis.
As I hear you talk, I'm wondering, what do you recommend people do to help? Because a lot of us that are not experts like you, that love our animals and care about this issue, what can we do to help right now?
There are many ways that people can help with regard to this. Of course, donations are really necessary. As Tama said, donations and funding are down for nonprofits during this time, but the need is up. So anybody that can make a donation is really appreciated. $5, $10 makes a difference. $10 buys a microchip for an animal. You think that's not a great donation, but that's important to us because there's a 95% chance that an animal with a microchip will be returned to its owners. Only 5% are ever really returned. So that makes a huge difference. People at home, if they're able to foster, if they're able to adopt, that's a huge help right now because there are so many animals in need. If you're looking for an animal, please, please, please adopt, don't shop. There are purebreds out there in all of our rescue communities, in purebred rescue groups that are ready for adoption, whether you want a Westie all the way up to Newfoundland. You've got breed-specific rescue groups that are ready to adopt out to you. So, and additionally, as I said before, fostering is really important. We need to get the animals off the streets and into homes. If I can step back a little bit, our transport program, we have new transport partners in the Northeast, as Tama said. The challenge for us is finding dogs that are ready to go on transport. With the shelters with limited intake right now, we don't have that staging area. So we have this real quandary about what to do with rescue partners in the Northeast that are asking for more animals, but we don't have the staging area anymore to care for them, to get them ready, to vet them, to prepare them for transport. So what's missing right now, there's a big gap in kind of that transition between going from the streets into either a rescue or a shelter all the way up through transport. And so if people are able to foster, that's where we fill that gap. So it's an important service. It's really a giving thing to do, because what you do is you prepare that dog to leave you, and it can be heartbreaking, but it's also incredibly rewarding.
You know, the Kinder Institute just put out their annual survey, and I've worked closely with Dr. Kleinberg for many years. His survey for the last 30 plus years has tracked the opinions of Houstonians and people in Harris County. And this year, when I was looking through the survey, what really jumped out at me is that 1 in 4 Harris County residents believes that the stray animal issue is the #1 issue for them. And when I kind of dug through, because I'm a little geek with data, I dug into it, realized that if you look at our county in certain zip codes, which is like almost like starting north, going east part of the Harris County and the south part of Harris County, for those people in those key neighborhoods, this was a #1 issue. More than traffic, more than crime, stray animals was a #1 issue. And across the board, what really was a big message that I thought in the survey was 64% reported that they wanted the city government, the county government, more of their tax dollars could be used to tackle the stray dog and cat population that we have in Harris County. How do you interpret that? What do you think that should be done?
You know, it wasn't a surprise to us because we've been hearing anecdotally for years about this issue. We've been hearing that the private sector and the nonprofit sector know that this is an issue. This is a quality of life issue that affects over half of our population in the greater Houston area. So it wasn't a surprise to us, but we were almost a little relieved to have this very solid data to back up what we know anecdotally from Dr. Kleinberg, a trusted source, somebody who's been studying this for decades. It's nice to hear that the data backs up what we know anecdotally, that this is an issue. And not only are animals suffering, but people are suffering. People cannot get out of their homes to get to Metro. We heard that directly from Metro, that people are afraid to get to the Metro system because of the stray animals running. Parents afraid to send their children to school. Schoolyards afraid to open their playgrounds because of the packs of dogs. So we know this is an issue, and now we have the data to back it up. And with 64% of residents saying, yes, let's support better animal welfare. Let's support getting rid of animal homelessness. We've got the data we need for city leaders to okay the funding going forward. If this is one of Houston's solvable problems. There are intrinsic issues with every city, but this is solvable, and it just needs the resources behind it.
Is there something that we haven't talked about yet? Because I know the two of you are regional experts when it comes to animal welfare, and you've been involved so long. Is there some element of this conversation that you think that we didn't touch on?
Well, I think that Houstonians love Houston, and we're a first class city. We really are. We do everything well. We do sports well. We do medical well. We do oil and gas well. We do space well. Technology. We do a lot of things well, but we fall short when it comes to animal welfare. And I think that if most Houstonians knew, if more Houstonians knew about this problem, that there would be more done about it. And that's why we're here. We're here to start the conversation, keep the conversation going, have a place at the table when it comes to civic issues. And we want our city to get behind solving this problem. There's an ROI on solving animal overpopulation. Eventually, we'll get to a point where we have manageable populations. We've been to other cities. We know that it's solvable, and this is something that can be achieved. We just need our city to get behind us on this. We need our civic leaders, our county, everybody to get behind solutions and make this truly, truly from the inside out a world-class city.
I want to thank the both of you for not just being here today in this interview, but really the work that you've done for so many years. Your leadership has been phenomenal, and as we started out and we said, you know, the true measure of any society can be found in how it treats its most vulnerable members. The other side to that is that true leadership is seen when you see people that take care of the most vulnerable. And I want to thank the both of you for the work that you've done and the work that you're doing.
And Mustafa, can I say one more thing too, please? We're here on behalf of everybody that works in animal welfare. There are literally tens of thousands of volunteers that work on this issue every day. They're in the trenches doing what we call heartbreaking and backbreaking work of animal rescue, animal welfare. And they get very little credit. They do it because they're passionate about it, because the need is so great that they can't look away. And so we represent all of them. It's not just us. There's a huge community out there that deserves kudos, a bravo, a brava, and a pat on the back for doing what they do. And we hope that they don't give up. We know that compassion fatigue is a real thing. We don't want them to give up. We want them to be invested in this solution, because it's coming and it will happen. It's just a matter of time.
Thank you all for being here today, and look forward to our ongoing conversation about how do we lift the value of animals in our society.
Thank you, Mustafa.